Senator Green.
Thanks, Mr Boys, and thank you for being here today. I know a number of your executives are Melbourne-based, and we appreciate you coming all this way with what's going on in Melbourne.
Thank you.
I just want to confirm, throughout that references committee and over the past couple of estimates, we've spoken a lot about the Boston Consulting Group report. I want to talk about a different report today, so that might relieve you, but it is also another one that I understand the Boston Consulting Group was paid to do. Were they paid an additional $600,000 to undertake a review of the government's changes through regulation in 2020 that resulted in service cuts? Was the Boston Consulting Group asked to do a review of the service cuts and regulations in 2020? So they had an additional piece of work through Australia Post around those regulations, or since their last?
Not on behalf of Australia Post, no.
Not on behalf of Australia Post,
No.
but on behalf of a shareholding minister or something like that?
Understand they may have been engaged by the shareholder departments. I'm
Right.
not totally sure, but yeah, that's not an engagement with Australia Post.
Okay.
Have you had any engagement with them?
Not through that engagement.
Senator
Senator,
Heads,
no.
I'll just remind you, don't have the call. Senator
Okay.
Green.
From what the department has explained to you, what was the Boston Consulting Group looking at and evaluating? Because I assume if they're doing a review of services, they're speaking to you about how things are going and what's going on. I mean, they're not doing it in isolation. They're obviously engaged with Australia Post on this review.
Senator, I'm not sure what they were doing in totality. I think that's a question best put to the departments or to the shareholder minister, but I think it was engaged by the departments. So, yeah.
But they haven't spoken to you about the review at all?
We provide information on a regular basis, monthly reporting, quarterly reporting to our shareholder departments, and what they choose to do with that, I guess, Senator, is up to them.
Okay, Minister, could you give us a bit more information, given that it seems like the department's the one that's contracted Boston Consulting Group? Just seeking to understand why the government, through the department, would be asking the Boston Consulting Group to have a look at those regulations and services.
Senator, this is the first I've heard of that, a second Boston Consulting Group report. If I can find anything out for you, I will bring it back to this committee.
Okay. Mr Boys, we'll come, if you could find that out for us, that would be helpful, because I've got a few questions about it. I just wanted to ask about how things are going through the temporary relief that was given through those regulations, because we've spoken a lot about them, and there was, some, not misinformation, but misunderstandings about what the purpose of them were and why they were brought in. We were told through a hearing through this committee that those were temporary measures and that they were to provide temporary relief, COVID relief for Australia Post. Is that right?
Correct.
Yep, okay. And when does that relief run out?
30th of June.
Okay. And in terms of Australia Post transferring small parcels, is that still happening? Is Australia Post transferring small parcels to posties, which are usually delivered through contractors?
So I'm not quite sure the reference to the question. We have our posties and our contractors deliver parcels through the temporary regulatory relief, which was brought in to deal with the sudden onset of COVID last year. So if we can wind our minds back, and it's funny that we're sitting here now and Melbourne's going back into lockdown, but, well, not so funny. Back at the onset of COVID last year, our parcel volumes grew 60% almost overnight. And we have this fixed postal network of posties, predominantly in back then on motorbikes, driving up and down streets every day.
Yes.
So we took 2,000 of those posties, transferred them across to vans so they could deliver the larger parcels and get the sheer volume that hit across late March and April last year, and that's continued. We now have around 1 million households each month still shopping online, and we'd
Mr.
expect
Boyds,
that to
I listened
continue.
very carefully to your opening statement. Thank
good.
you. I understand what's happened. My question, can I just seek to understand this though? Is there a practice, you've taken some posties off their bikes and into vans. I can understand why. But have you also been giving posties who are still on bikes the option or the direction to deliver smaller parcels? Because they're, as you say, and you claim that there's been an uptake in parcels, and there's a lot more smaller parcels. People are doing online shopping. Are those posties getting more smaller parcels than they would have before, rather than just letters?
Well, we try to give as much work to our posties. So what happens with the small capacity vehicles like the motorcycles, and we were moving off them, one from a safety perspective, but also because they are small capacity, into either the larger EDVs, which have got significantly more carrying capacity. That's our three-wheel bikes. And into vans. So the smaller parcels will go to posties if they can carry that, or into the high capacity vehicles, which are also done by posties, or in vans, which could be contractor or postie. So you can't get a carton of 6 wine on the back of a motorbike. So you might be able to get an EDV, but definitely in a van.
But
so,
they're taking more parcels than they would have pre-COVID.
I would have to actually confirm that they were taking
Do you want to
more,
take that on notice and we can find
parcels on. We're taking more. We're 60% up in parcels in April last year. We're now over the last 12 months. We're 32% up in parcels in totality.
Not totality. I'm asking, and
No,
I'm being very.
But we're
very
streaming
clear
those
about
where
what
we
I'm
can.
asking.
We're trying to provide
I'm asking
our work.
about those posties on bikes and if
Okay.
they're delivering more parcels than they were before COVID, and I'm quite happy for you to take that on notice.
Yeah.
I'd like to understand if the executive team at Australia Post or the board has discussed a strategy to transfer smaller parcels to contractors to deal with this smaller parcels issue.
Senator, we have more parcels in total, so smaller, medium and large. So we're delivering more large parcels than we ever did before, but we're also delivering more small parcels than we ever did before. So we're trying to put the work for the parcels to the best mode of delivery.
My question was about the strategy to deal with that. You've repeated those facts from your opening statement. My question is about, is there a strategy that the board or the executive team has discussed to transfer the delivery of small parcels to contractors? Is that something that you are considering?
Senator, operationally we talk about how we can be the most effective and efficient that we can all the time. Australia Post has very little margin for error. You would appreciate that we've got $8 billion in revenue and last year's profit was 53 million. So we are constantly looking at ways that we can continue to deal with the letters decline. As I said, 1 million less letters every single day being delivered. So if we can stream some more parcels to our posties, fantastic. If they're unable to carry those parcels because now they've become larger, we either change the mode of transport to the electronic delivery vehicle or into vans. So, and we stream that where the capacity is enabled.
Okay. Mr. Boyd, I'm inclined to not interrupt you. The chair has asked us on multiple times not to do that, but I am being very direct in my questioning and you need to answer my question. Have the executive team of Australia Post or the board discussed a strategy to transfer small parcels to contractors? If that is part of the wider strategy that you have talked about, then really the only answer I need is yes, that is part of what you're discussing.
Senator, we look to optimise across our contract fleet and our postie fleet. So constantly we're looking to optimise our network.
And is that part of that discussion?
The shift between both, not just one way, the shift between both is a constant discussion that we have. So we have a variety of products. It's not just by size. So express post, when the plane lands, the postie might already be in your street. So we look to optimise. There is not a specific strategy to move one way or the other. There is the ongoing operational improvements to make Australia Post as efficient as we can and deal with the declining letters.
All right, we'll come back to it.
Okay.
because I don't feel like you've answered my question, and I do want to understand where the strategy is going around this issue. On relief posties, how far do relief posties travel from delivery centre to delivery centre? Is there a maximum average distance for those relief posties? There might be someone else who's
Senator,
operationally
not
inclined.
something that operationally I could tell you. I'm not
Is
sure
there
whether
someone
Ms
in the
Davies might have
room?
any information. Otherwise, we might just take that on notice and come back to you.
Sorry, there's no one with you today who can answer if there's a maximum average. Is there a distance or a cap for those people?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
So you have
If you could
no.
take that on
No,
notice.
No, we'd have to take it. Yep.
I would like to understand whether Australia Post sent relief staff from mainland Tasmania during the recent state election. There's a period of time there that we're interested in having a think about. I'm nodding at Senator Urquhart because she knows about this issue. And how often relief posties are sent to Tasmania, because there's a lot of material going out during a state election. There's obviously, particularly during a COVID election, there's a lot more postal voting going on. So I'd like to understand how many relief staff went to Tasmania. Do you know that answer, Mr. Boys?
I don't know the number. Yes, we did send some posties to Tasmania, whether they were relief posties or whether they just volunteered to transfer down there. And we also
Senator Abetz.
and we also sent some relief into the far north of Western Australia recently as well.
Do you
to
know
help out
where
up there.
in Tasmania those posties were sent?
I couldn't tell you exactly, no. They were down there, as you pointed out, to support with the increased volumes across the snap election, because we normally have time to plan for an election. That was quite a snap election, and so we didn't have time to
You've
plan.
got a location in Tasmania, which is an ADM-enabled site. Were the relief posties sent there?
As I said, Senator, I have to take that on notice. I don't know the operational details of sending posties to which delivery centre. We've got a large number of delivery centres, as you'd appreciate.
Okay, I'll rephrase my question. Which there is a site in Tasmania that's an ADM-enabled site. Which one is it?
I couldn't tell you, Senator. We've got a number of a large number of delivery centres around Australia, so and a number in Tasmania. So I mean, we can see if we can find somebody who might be watching to come back and let you know.
I'm sure someone can shoot through a text. It shouldn't be difficult to determine. Mr. Boyds, have you told any sort of select Australian Post staff that the company has identified a legal loophole in the pre-COVID service regulations that will permit Australia Post to operate with reduced service delivery under the original service regulations?
No.
Okay. Mr. McDonald, is there any truth to this suggestion that whether you have made a similar comment to Australia Post management personnel that a loophole has been discovered in those regulations and there's a sense that Australia Post could continue to operate with reduced service delivery under the original service regulations?
Thank you, Senator. Nick McDonald, General Counsel and Corporate Secretary, Australia Post. Let's see. So have I made a statement to management personnel that there might be a loophole that exists in the regulations?
Yes.
No, I haven't. I have
Something
been asked...
like that, maybe?
Look, I have been asked that question about whether the regulations are open to interpretation.
Who asked you that question?
Oh, look, I can't remember. It came up in the course of a conversation about regulatory relief.
Sorry.
And my view was that there wasn't that sort of a loophole, and even if there was, it wouldn't be tenable to rely upon it.
Oh, okay. So it came up in the context of a discussion about regulatory relief. So it wasn't a conversation you had with one of the fantastic cleaners at your corporate office. I'm talking where did this conversation take place? Who's having this conversation?
Look, I can't recall, but I can recall the issue being raised with me and expressing that view. So, but
Language around, I mean, look, it's an impending date. It's something that's has changed the way Australia Post has operated. It's created a lot of media attention, a lot of attention on the Australia Post board and executive throughout the last couple of months. And someone mentions the word legal loophole through regulations, and you can't remember who that might have been.
well, the word loophole was never used.
Right.
But I was asked
What was
about...
the words that were used?
I can't recall the words that were used. I just recall that I was asked...
Well, I think you said on Hansard a way around.
No, I think I said, was there an interpretation of the regulations?
Open to interpretation.
Whether it was open to interpretation in a way that would enable alternate day delivery without there being permanent regulatory reform to that effect. And I mean, my personal view on that is that it's not open to that interpretation. And even if it was, it wouldn't be a tenable argument because we've just had temporary regulatory relief to achieve that purpose. You wouldn't have needed that aspect of the regulatory relief if it was open in the regulations.
Sorry, you said that's your opinion. Do you mean you've had a look at the regulations from, I know you're General Counsel, so
Yes.
when you say opinion, it's a bit of a different thing than when I say opinion. So it's a legal opinion from you as General Counsel that there's that the idea that you could get around these regulations, you can't see the interpretation in that.
Well, look, I haven't given formal advice or written advice.
Yeah, okay.
It was in conversation, the observation was made, and I made the corresponding response.
Sure.
So, for me, it hasn't gone beyond that.
All right. Well, would you mind taking on notice, because I'm sure you have some very detailed notes about meetings and things that take place. I'm sure that there are minutes of conversations that take place if they're a formal meeting. Could you take on notice when that meeting occurred and who you had that conversation with, so we can understand where the follow-through will be?
Well, look, I can take it on notice, but I can't recall.
That's
had the
why I'm
conversation
asking
when
you
it
to
was
take
with.
it on notice, because you
So-
said you can't recall.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Boys, in terms of operational arrangements, how are you preparing to revert back to the original service standards by the 30th of June this year? It's not a long time.
It's not a long time, Senator, and I think through parts of the inquiry and also last Senate estimates, it was very clear that we were the regulatory relief ended on the 30th of June. As we've seen with the lockdown in Melbourne, the pandemic is not over, and the structural changes between letters and parcels are permanent. We've seen that with 1 million less letters now being delivered every single day. So we've ordered new electronic delivery vehicles, 1,000, which start to drop shortly in the next month or so. We've got the motorbikes coming back out of service, or some of those motorbikes that are coming back out of service needed being refurbed at the moment. They were put in mothballs, and we've got something like 2,000 motorbikes coming back. So but it's not a matter of just because the regs go back. It took us about 6 months to implement alternate day delivery, and it will take us a considerable amount of time to revert back. As I said in my opening statement, we've got 6,600 rounds. That's around 8,000 people that will be impacted by this. And Senator, I think it might have even been you that raised it with me previously about the impact, the mental health impacts of how quickly we did the change last time, and we're very, very conscious of the health and well-being of our people, and it will take some time to one, design what this new operational model is going to be, and then two, implement it. And we're really pleased to say that we're working with our union colleagues now on with local working groups to do that design.
So it's not just a matter of reverting back to previous arrangements?
No, Senator, we took over 2,000 posties and we transferred them from letters into parcels. And we redid 6,600 rounds before, and we can't just put them back to the old ones because we're now delivering 1 million less letters every single day. We've got obligations on our CSO. We've got obligations under PGPA Act to be economical, efficient and effective with our resources, and we have an obligation to deliver a commercial return. It will cost significant amount, and it's not just a matter of taking those resources and transferring back. It was logical to take resources from a loss-making, letters lost $240 million the year before last, and transfer those to the growth area of parcels, and which makes a profit. To take those resources and put them back into the loss-making letters is going to be a significant exercise.
Okay. And sorry to put this on the record and make this clear, but obviously there's imperative to be economically efficient, but there's also legislation and regulations in place to make sure that Australians get their letters and in a certain time. That's why you've had the regulations in the first place. So there's the economic part of it we need to take into account, but there's also service obligations, and that's what I'm asking you about. The obligations, Mr. McDonald, maybe you could answer this. In terms of the way the regulations, or in terms of the way Australia Post has interpreted the regulations, does that actually allow for you to wait 6 months after the 30th of June to get back to the previous delivery methods? Because if it runs out on the 30th of June, wouldn't that mean you have to return to your previous service delivery obligations by then?
Senator, so the temporary, I'll let Mr. McDonald handle the legal detail. The temporary regulatory relief, there were a number of elements, first of all, so
yes.
We'll go back. There was the flexibility around our post offices, and we're delighted that 99.2% of the post offices were open 99.2% of the time, and we didn't need to avail ourselves of that part of the regulation. There are other aspects around priority mail. We were able to put in a bulk priority mail service during the pandemic, but the over-the-counter priority mail service we haven't, and a large part of that is due to flights. As we've seen even today, most flights in and out of Melbourne have been cancelled, and therefore our priority mail service is going to be extremely difficult to get back until flights get back. The delivery timetable, so then there's delivery timetable and delivery frequency. The difference for those is, one is how fast you get your letters, which I think is what you're alluding to, and the other is, do we ride up and down the street every single day? That's the frequency aspect. On the delivery timetable, we're at 97% under the current standard. We believe we're only about 2% off the pre-COVID standards for speed, and as soon as we get some more flights, we believe that we can get back there very, very quickly. And but it's on the delivery frequency riding up and down the street, which is the redesign of 6,600 rounds that we need to do. But on the speed, we are absolutely committed for reliability, consistency,
absolutely
and speed.
Not.
Absolutely.
My question is about the regulation and how that's going to operate. And that's why I asked Mr. McDonald about how the regulation is going to operate and whether you'll be able to meet, because that regulation ends, or the relief measures end in a month. So does that mean that you won't be meeting those service obligations after that, or you'll be seeking to have the regulation extended? Where is this going?
Okay.
And thank you, Chair, for the indulgence. This is a very important thing to get right, and it's happening very soon.
We understand. Let Mr. McDonald finish, and then I'll go to other senators,
Well,
and
if
then
we
come
could just
back.
clear, if I get the answer, then I can move on.
So, Senator, I'll do my best to address your query. So, under the Australian Postal Corporation Act, there's provision for performance standards to be applied to the delivery of letter services. Those performance standards are contained in the performance standards regulations, and they're the regulations that were amended in order to provide that temporary regulatory relief. So that temporary regulatory relief expires on the 30th of June.
Yes.
So when you go from 30 June to 1 July, the performance standards change from day 1 to day 2.
Yes.
Now, practically speaking, an organisation can't turn itself around overnight.
But you knew the deadline was coming, though, as well.
Okay, so
Yeah.
Senator, if I can
Yeah.
continue. So what will it mean? So from the 1st of July, the performance standards will not revert entirely because there was one change that was ongoing, but the performance standards that we're talking about will go back to daily delivery and the timetable will change.
And you'll be meeting those standards.
So under the Act, we're then measured against those performance standards.
Yep.
The Auditor General assesses our performance against those standards across a financial year, and we report against that performance. If we don't meet those performance standards, then there are provisions within the Act that deal with the consequences for that. We can be asked to prepare a remediation plan, we need to report back and so on. All of that's sort of down the road, but what it means in a practical sense is, yes, from the 1st of July, we will need to reorganise our operations so that we can meet those performance standards.
And you anticipate that you will not meet those performance standards on the 1st of July? That there will be a time period?
As our acting CEO has explained, there will be a variety of things that need to be done operationally in order to be able to adjust our operations to meet those different requirements.
Okay. But you knew the deadline was coming. So you've put... I don't understand why you haven't prepared to revert back so in time with the regulation. And with respect, the regulation did go to... It did have a disallowance motion, so Parliament has effectively given you this time period. They didn't give you any longer than that. I mean, there's constituents in regional Australia particularly who are concerned about the number of days in terms of delivery of letters. We were told as parliamentarians that you had this period of time for temporary relief. There would be only a temporary time, but it looks like it's going to be longer than that. Is that what's going to happen?
Senator, I think we've covered off in the various aspects. One of the areas that we probably weren't so clear on is the temporary regulatory relief didn't provide any changes to delivery to post office boxes, so at a post office, or to regional Australia. So there was no change, so we're already there. There's nothing to revert back to. There are some, as I think Senator Mackenzie referred to in the Cobb and Co Act, where under the census of 1991, they're captured, and we'll be working to get those back. But regional Australia was not affected in the large part by the changes or any changes to regulatory relief.
But you won't be meeting your standards on the 1st of July, and you're prepared to not meet those standards. That's in the plan. That's the plan.
Increasingly, as we've been told, the community and the larger population see Australia Post as a deliverer of letters and parcels. It's not letters or parcels.
That's not an answer to my question at all.
If we were to move, we could not be able to deliver with the volume that I'm now expecting that we will see next week due to the Melbourne lockdown. So it's fortunate we have the regulatory relief where we are at the moment because we're able to deliver letters and parcels with what we've got.
Can I just finish on one question? Have you asked for the regulations to be extended?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Betts.
Sorry, Chair, if I may, I do have the answers to those questions you asked earlier about Tasmania.
Yes,
Senator.
thank you. I'm sure Senator
So
would want to hear that.
There are 3 ADM sites in Tasmania: Western Shore, Eastern Shore and Kingston. They're all in Hobart. There are no other ADM sites in Tasmania. We sent 7 relief staff to Tasmania, specifically for the election volumes.
Thank you.
Senator